Hello everyone. Today I wanted to go over some pros and cons of owning the 2022 Ram 2500 Power Wagon. Welcome back to Motoring Adventures. I'm Preston. Now I've owned this 2022 Ram Power Wagon now for just about 8 months and have put close to 20,000 miles on it. I put around 19,000 miles on this thing. So I figured it was about time I went over the pros and the cons of owning it and what I think about it in general. Now if you've been following the channel, September 2024 I traded my 2021 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Rubicon 392 for this slightly used 2022 Ram 2500 Power Wagon. It had right around 26,000 miles at the time and was roughly 2.5 years old. And it was in excellent condition. This was a level 2 Power Wagon, so it has a lot more of the creature comforts, has the leather seats, LED headlights. It has it came with an awful lot of features for a very decent price being used. The asking price of this was right around $55,000 at the time, and I was able to talk them down, get it down to around $51,500. Now, of course, I traded a vehicle, so there is, the amount I got for my trade, and I feel like I did eat a little bit on the 392. Their values were kind of dropping at the time. So overall, I think I did pretty good on this compared to what a new one goes for, which would have been closer to 60 or 70. Actually, I think the MSRP on this was in the low 70s or high 60s. And at the time I was looking at possibly getting a tradesman Power Wagon, which I've owned. A little bit of background, I've owned 2 other Ram Power Wagons before this one. I had a 2014 tradesman Power Wagon, and then I had a 2020 that I bought used. So I traded the Jeep Rubicon 4xe in on that one. And that was also a level 2 Power Wagon, but it had a few more options and features than this one did. So yes, I was looking at getting tradesman Power Wagon at the time, because they were going around, mid 50s. But I think for getting one that was loaded and just slightly used, this was a good deal. So let me just dive right in. I'm going to go over 5 pros and 5 cons to owning this 2022 Ram Power Wagon. I'm going to do these in order of the best to worst. So the pro number 1 is going to be what I consider to be the number 1 pro or positive thing about owning the 2022 Ram Power Wagon. So pro number 1 is its off-road capability. Big surprise, I know. But with having lockers, sway bar disconnect, solid axles, an actual low range transfer case, 410 gears, 2 inches of lift height over a stock Ram 2500, Bilstein shocks, skid plates, the 12,000 pound Warren winch, off-road capable tires from the factory, although I have changed those out with the 37-inch BF Goodrich mud terrain KM3s that were on my Rubicon 392. That is the key thing that sets this aside from a regular Ram 2500, is its ability to go off-roading. And I think in the last 8 months, I have tested that out pretty well. Taken it out on dirt trails, washboard roads. I've had it in mud, sand, you name the terrain, I've pretty much taken this on. Probably the only thing I haven't taken it on is kind of an icy trail or snow. But I've taken this thing rock crawling for a Power Wagon. I've used the low range, the lockers, the sway bar disconnect. I've banged up its skid plates. This particular one, I added the Mopar Ram rock rails to the sides to kind of help beef up the sides and protect the body a little bit. Now, these probably aren't the best rock rails out there to fully protect the body, and that is evident as it doesn't go past the main cab of the truck. So the bottom part of the bed's exposed, and that was kind of brought to light on the last outing I did out to California. But I'd say this thing's pretty off-road capable. And if you're looking for something that can just, do pretty moderate, mild to moderate off-roading, I'd say this is it. And it can even do more. It's just, it'll be able to do more than you're willing to take it. You're probably not willing to get body damage and totally bang things up. But this thing can handle a lot more than you're willing to dish, which leads me into pro number 2. Actually, no, I'll go into that a little more for pro number 3, but pro number 2 is the utility of this thing. Now, if you're just going off-roading, there are many other more off-road capable vehicles out there. But if you want to go off-roading, but you want to have a lot of utility, you have a need to have a lot of utility, this thing has it. To me, it's probably a good mix of off-road prowess with just the utility of a heavy-duty truck. Now, is this going to perform as well as a standard heavy-duty truck in terms of towing and cargo capacity? No, because it has a softer suspension that's made for off-roading. You sacrifice some of that. Your payload in the bed is less. Your payload is less than what a standard 2500 is, and your tow rating is less than a standard 2500. But with that said, this thing still has over 10,000 pounds of towing capacity, which is excellent. If you're comparing this to other off-road pickups on the market, such as Toyota Tacomas or Jeep Gladiators, that's probably higher than all of those are. And its payload, which is pretty light for a heavy-duty truck. This particular Power Wagon's payload capacity is 1,400 pounds, which a lot of people would say that's pretty weak for an HD truck. But you have to think about it. This is an HD truck that can take on some pretty gnarly trails and has a softer suspension to handle that and to ride better on the trails. It's not going to ride as well as something made for Bajaing like a TRX or a Ford Raptor, F-150 Raptor, but it's going to soak up the bumps and ride, I think, better than a standard HD truck would. So in comparison to, say, a Jeep Gladiator or that sort of vehicle, this can hold an awful lot more gear. There's so much more utility to this, in my opinion, and that's good for purposes such as overlanding or being a work truck or working in remote locations that require you to go off-road and into rough terrain. This is an excellent vehicle for that. On to pro number 3, and that is ruggedness. Now let me just read to you the textbook definition of what ruggedness means. It is the quality of being strong, tough, and resilient, often with a rough or uneven character. When I read that, totally reminds me of what this truck is. This thing, it's not for the faint of heart. It's so big, it's so rough around the edges. I mean, it's somewhat refined. It's a modern vehicle with modern technologies and crash avoid, ability to withstand crashes and stuff like that. And it is, they've made the cab somewhat quiet. It's quieter than a Jeep Wrangler, I'll tell you that, because it's got smoother lines on the outside, so there's wind noise is less, and it's less affected by the wind if you're driving in the wind. That actually should be a bonus con if you're comparing it to something like a Jeep. But this thing will just take a beating and not care. It's like the Honey Badger. Honey Badger don't care. Well, Power Wagon don't care. It's been coined before, and I've seen that in person. I was driving this thing. Actually, this was my second Power Wagon, the 2020 white one I had. We were in the Lincoln National Forest in New Mexico, and I was needing to turn around. I was towing the M1102 trailer, and little did I know there was actually a large log in front of me when I was turning around. I couldn't see it. That's one of the cons, is you can't really see over the hood of this thing. But I ran into that log, and I didn't even notice it until after I reviewed the video that this thing just plowed through that log and just split it in half like it was a twig. It even made a snapping sound in the video. It's just funny. This thing didn't even flinch. I didn't even hardly feel it in the steering. That's just how robust and tough this truck is. So it does give you a real high level of confidence when driving it. The pro number 4, and some people are gonna not think this is a pro, but the technology and creature comforts that this thing comes with. Now, I have owned a Tradesman in the past, and a lot of people say that is the true Power Wagon because it doesn't have all the extra nannies and gizmos and all that kind of stuff. You know, that's just fluff, right? This is a, you know, tough truck, a man's truck. You don't need all that, but you know, at the same time, I do like having a lot of modern conveniences in a truck, especially if you're going to pay, you know, over $50,000–$60,000 for one of these. You expect it to have some of modern conveniences. I mean, of course, you know, everything nowadays has, you know, wireless, Bluetooth technology such as that, but when you get this with a level 2 trim package and it's a non-tradesman, you're at least going to get LED headlights, LED tail lights, a larger infotainment screen usually, and you know, I like the power inverters in this thing. Actually, that adds to its utility. And even if you like the Tradesman trim, which is an excellent trim level, like I said, I've owned one. It's like everything you need, nothing you don't, right? But you can actually order, you know, option it up individually with things you do like to add to a certain extent. I don't think you can have the 60/40 rear seat put into that with the full, you know, cup holder folding down. I think the things they offer in this, I mean, they're comparable to other makes and models of vehicle, but it just adds to this thing. I love the large screen in the display. Now it's like a full digital display, but I like having the mix of the analog gauges and the LED, you know, the LCD screen. But it's big, bright display. It gives you all kinds of information about the truck. You know, stuff that's standard in a lot of vehicles now, but it is really nice. You know, I started off when a lot of that stuff wasn't included in a vehicle, so it is pretty nice to have. And pro number 5, this is kind of subjective, but the styling. You know, this is still the same basic styling that they had in the, I think, beginning in 2009. You know, other than the refresh they did in 2018, or they switched to the 8-speed automatic and they refreshed the front. The rest of it is still the same basic truck that I had in 2014 and in 2020. And yeah, I like the styling. I really do. I mean, I've had the newer one, the refreshed 1500 styling, you know, that you can get in the TRX. I mean, that's that same styling, but they've added more to it. But I also had a 2019 Ram Rebel, and I did like that as well. I mean, it has a roomier back seat than this one does, but there's just something about the styling of these I really like, that the front kind of pushes forward. The lines on the doors, it's so quiet. Like, there's hardly any wind noise. And, you know, part of that is, you know, they really insulate the cab, but also it's due to the aerodynamics of the vehicle. To me, it's a very good looking truck. And they did a good job, and I can see why they haven't really changed it much in many years, you know, going on 15 plus years now. Okay, I've got a few bonus pros to the Ram Power Wagon. Bonus pro number 1 is the 6.4 liter Hemi engine. It's tried and true. It's been in this thing since 2014 as their main. Before that, they had the 5.7 in here in the 2500s, but when they moved to the 6.4, you know, it added, you know, 420 or 410 horsepower, 429 pound-feet of torque to this thing. And, you know, at that time in 2014, they changed to the 6-speed automatic versus the 4. And that was my first Power Wagon. And I've driven the 5.7. It gets up, you know, it has enough power to do what it needs to. But this just gives it that much more. It's not, you know, going to be a TRX quick truck, but it definitely has all the power and torque it needs. In fact, you know, we were towing a 26-foot travel trailer once and going uphill, and this thing was still climbing. It was still accelerating. We actually passed somebody going onto the freeway. They were in just like a passenger car, and that impressed the hell out of me and my wife. We were like, wow, you know, no, it's not the diesel engine. You know, it's not a Cummins, it's not a Power Stroke, but it's a really good motor, tried and true. I mean, it's had its issues. There's, you know, there's the Hemi tick, and you know, the bearings can get worn out if you idle it too much. So just make sure you don't idle it, you know, for hours on end. You know, a lot of people are using this as a work truck, and they'll sit in it with the AC on, and you know, it'll be out there all day idling. And just, you know, keep an eye on your oil, change it frequently. I like to change it more frequently than the in-dash indicator likes to say, even though I have gone the length of that before. But I think if you do those things, this motor is a fairly reliable motor, and it'll go the distance. Some of these have, you know, multiple hundreds of thousands of miles on them. And bonus pro number 2 is the ZF HP 75 8-speed automatic transmission. I said before, I've had the 6-speed and the 8-speed, and I think the 8-speed is just that much better. The 6-speed was good, but this thing always knows what gear to be in. You never have trouble finding a gear. It's pretty quick in its shifting, even though it's not as quick as the one I had in the 392. Which is the same transmission, I believe. It's really nice, and it helps it, you know, just get that much more MPG. Even though this thing's not rated to get a lot of MPG, you know, I average around 9 MPG in my 2014 Tradesman with this 6-speed. My white one averaged more like 11. This one's been getting closer to high 9s, low 10s. I think just because I moved up to 37s for the first time in a Power Wagon. My white one had 35s, and my original one, the dark metallic gray one, had 33s and then 34s for a while. So this one definitely is you know, turning the most tire rotational weight, and for the longest time I didn't have it recalibrated, so it was giving out a false MPG reading. But now I've recalibrated it using the AEV ProCal, and those numbers, I have seen them improving slowly. It's going to take it a while, but it's getting closer back to that 11 MPG for overall. Like, I mean, the highest highs I've seen in this is about 15 on the highway. If you're cruising like 65, 70, it's relatively level. And, you know, the worst MPGs, you know, towing something really heavy on the highway or off-roading, it'll get, you know, 7, 8 miles per gallon. But that's to be expected when you're doing those types of things. Okay, we are now on to the cons of the 2022 Ram Power Wagon. Con number 1 is going to be its large size. It's the first thing you notice when you drive this truck is just how incredibly big it is. And that hinders it in terms of its turning radius. Like if you're trying to turn around, if you're just on a 4-lane road and you only have like 2 extra lanes, you know, forget it. You're going to end up doing, you know, multi-point turn. You need at least 3 travel lanes in the opposite direction to get this beast to fully turn around. And if you think about that, that would hinder you off-roading as well, because sometimes you're in a very tight situation, like on a switchback, and this thing, you're either going to have to do like a 1,000,000-point turn, or it's just not going to make it. I mean, it is its downfall, is the size. I mean, it's a pro in a way because it allows you the extra room to carry everything and the extra space and just the overall size. But the large size does hinder it in many aspects. So con number 2, and this might be specific to just this Power Wagon maybe, but the transmission. I've had a kind of a clunkiness in it, or a shifting in it. Maybe it shifts hard sometimes. Like if I'm driving, going a certain speed, like 35, accelerating up to it, and then if I let off the gas, you'll feel the vehicle like shift forward, almost like it hard upshifted. And I'm not quite sure what that is. I've put 18,000 miles or 19,000 miles in this thing, but like I said, it had 26 when I bought it. So this thing's up to 46,000 miles. And a lot of places say it's a good idea to have your transmission serviced at 30,000, especially if you're doing heavy towing or taking this thing off-road and beating it up, which I don't consider what I do to it beating it up, but it is using it more. It is going to put more wear and tear on components than if you just drove it on the street all day or just let it sit here all day. So it probably could use a transmission service, you know, fluid flush and everything. You know, maybe that'll remedy that, maybe it won't. I'm hoping it will. I just hope this transmission just doesn't go out on me. You know, I've read some horror stories about that happening at higher mileages usually, but it is, you know, I'm gonna have to list it as a con. It's one of the cons to the one I own, at least. Con number 3 is shakiness of it, particularly if you're on the highway. Sometimes there's like a vibration just in the vehicle, in the body, and it kind of comes and goes. I thought it was the tires that I'd switched over from the Rubicon 392. but I've had these things balanced and rebalanced several times. The funny thing is, it's smooth to start out. Like if you first get out on the highway, it rides so super smooth, almost like my 1500 Rebel did. But after a while, you'll start to feel kind of a shaky. It's not really in the steering wheel. So I wonder if it isn't the tires and wheels, that maybe it is something else. Sometimes I wonder if it's the transmission, you know, maybe there's something not right in there. But I do have to kind of dog at least this one for that. And then the other two Power Wagons I had, the white one was probably the smoothest riding, but my tradesman also sometimes would have a vibration. I mean, part of it's the nature of the vehicle. I mean, it's heavy duty, solid front and rear axles. I mean, it's not gonna ride as smooth as like an independent suspension truck. And that's just kind of the reality of it. I mean, that's also what they throw in as a con for Jeeps, you know, is their ride sometimes, you know, because they have solid axles. So I think part of it's that, and maybe part of it might be my tires are wearing a little unevenly. I did recently have it aligned, so hopefully that remedies them from wearing unevenly any longer. And then mud terrains aren't usually supposed to last much longer than 30,000 miles anyway. So definitely want to keep an eye on that, as you don't want to get death wobble, and that's solid axle vehicles can be prone to that. So that is a con to solid axle vehicles in general, but definitely going to have to be a con for this as well. Con number 4 is going to have to be the height of this thing. Now looking back, you can kind of combine height with the large size, but when I say height, I mean more in terms of passengers getting in and out and accessing things. It is pretty high. Like my wife is only 5'2", and so she has a hard time getting into this. When I added the Mopar rock rails, they have a little bit of step, and she said that was a vast improvement over having nothing, because it does put the step quite a few inches lower than the floor, but it's still kind of a chore to get in and out of. And I find that the tailgate itself is kind of hard to get in and out. You know, I bring with me this kind of step ladder to help me get in, and you know, they make little like fold out steps that you can use, but you know, if you're off-roading, that might get banged up in the back. And of course you can remedy the side getting in and out with some, you know, aftermarket running boards or steps or power steps, but then again, that kind of hinders your off-roading capability in terms of breakover angle. You might hit those or damage them, and they're usually, a lot of them hang lower. Definitely the height of this can be a con. And finally, con number 5, and I had to throw this in there, even though it's kind of a given that this thing is going to have this, but it's the poor gas mileage, the lack of miles per gallon. This is classified as a heavy-duty pickup truck, so it's not required to have a certain miles per gallon on you know, the government EPA sticker. It drinks the gas. It's heavy. It weighs roughly 7,500 pounds empty, and so you add, you know, 20-something gallons of fuel into this, and then all the passengers, and you load the payload up and you tow. I mean, even if you're not towing, even if you're just it's going to drink gas, especially if you're just cruising around town. Now, if you get on the highway, you know, like I said before, you get up as high as 15, 16 miles per gallon, especially if you're still on stock high tires. You know, adding 37s to this without re-gearing, I mean, it doesn't feel like it needs to be re-geared at all. It has plenty of power and torque still, even loaded down, but it is going to hurt its gas mileage some. You know, like I said, I'm averaging, you know, close to 10. That's because a lot of it's not recalibrated, but even then, 10, anything below 15 is a large pill to swallow for a lot of people. Definitely something to consider, and definitely a con of the vehicle. I've got a couple bonus cons here, and I had to I didn't really dig deep for these, but I thought about these. These are just the things that, you know, bother me. You know, if there really is much to bother me about this truck, I absolutely love this truck, actually. So bonus con number 1 is that the exhaust is too quiet. Too quiet. I mean, a lot of people, that's a really good thing. My wife likes a quiet cab, especially if we're traveling long distance. She just wants it quiet as can be. Give this thing some sound. Let it sound a little bit as aggressive as it looks. It's a massive, large, heavy-duty pickup with a massive V8 in it that is muffled, although it does still have some sound to it. I put plenty of sound clips in my videos and off-roading this thing. There is some sound, but it is pretty muffled. I think give it a little bit more. And bonus con number 2, the steel bumpers on this thing are pretty weak, especially for being marketed as an off-road vehicle. Now, it's nice that they have powder coated these, nice texture, and, and they are steel bumpers. I mean, they are fairly stout for normal situations. But if you're going to market this as an off-road capable vehicle, you got to put some stronger steel bumpers on this thing, Bram. I mean, you do it on the Jeeps. If you get the steel bumper group, the steel bumpers I had on my Rubicon 392, twice as strong, maybe 3 times as strong as these. You can even see here, this is from when I bought it. The previous owner had a dimple there. And then I've ran into the front bumper the times I've taken it out off-roading. But I was kind of surprised it was that weak. And maybe also it's just the fact that this is a heavier vehicle. But the ones that were on the Jeep Wrangler withstood a lot more than this thing. So if they can build it for the Jeep Wrangler, they should be able to build it for the Ram Power Wagon, I would think. And also related to the bumper, this is not an extra con, but they put the rear parking sensors, when they switched over with the refresh in 2018, I believe, the parking sensors used to be midway up the bumper, kind of protected. But then they put them down here at the bottom with just this piece of plastic. I was like, that is the most vulnerable location and something you don't really want to mess up. I mean, is it really that vital or serious? If you do, no, but you're messing with sensors and wires and big tangled jumbled mess. Now I'm surprised when out in the California trip, I did smack this rear end when I was being towed up an obstacle. I know, how embarrassing, right? Towed up by a tiny little Toyota pickup. But I think this thing did fairly well in that obstacle, actually, but for what it is. But anyway, the rear hit the ground, and actually the rear hitch here did protect these sensors. You can see this is a little bit loose now from that hit, but sensors still work great. And actually, if I didn't mention that, you probably wouldn't even notice that this thing was damaged at all in the back. But I do think it's like maybe the sensors weren't working that good midway up the bumper, and that's why they moved it. But why would you make it worse than it was before? I don't know. There's probably some reason Ram did that, and who knows? If you know the reason, please let us know. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this pros and cons of the 2022 Ram Power Wagon, kind of a look back at the 8 months that I've owned this thing and taken it, put it through its paces in terms of towing, off-roading, daily driving, everything. I am really happy with this truck. I really love the utility of it, the look and feel, the ride of it. I like that I can really utilize the bed. There's different aftermarket options, and it'll do most of the off-roading that I'd like to do, with the exception of some trails that were on my bucket list. I would like to run Rubicon Trail someday or Black Bear Pass, but perhaps I'll have another vehicle to be able to do that in at some point. But this made more sense for our family, our situation. I do greatly every single day miss the Rubicon 392 I own. That was probably, I did a video about that one, and it was probably the best overall vehicle for me, for my wants and desires as an automotive enthusiast. That was the ultimate vehicle for me. But it's not just me I got to deal with. I have a family, I have a wife, I have 2 daughters, and actually this made more sense, if it's just me running solo, than to have this setup than to have a Jeep plus a trailer to pull. So from that aspect, I think this was definitely the way to go. I've been really satisfied with it. Anyway, that's it for now. Stay tuned to the next one, and as always, take care.